And Bible history it is. And we are in the sixth period of Bible history, which is the period of the kingdom. And I have my Bible open to 1 Samuel chapter 16. Last session, we talked about the first king, Saul. Not so good. And finally, he was rejected by the Lord, as we read in chapter 15 and verse 26. And so God always has a plan. God is never frustrated. We may get frustrated. We may not know what we're doing sometimes. God always knows what he's doing. He's never up a creek. And no, he has it. And he always has a person to do his work. And if he touches you, make sure that you do something. You know, it's interesting that God may have put you on this earth just to do one thing, but that thing is very important. Moses waited 80 years in preparation till he led the people out, but that was his task. Well, we're to chapter 16, and the Lord said to Samuel is still around, hard to get rid of him. And the Lord said to Samuel, how long are you going to mourn over Saul? Because Samuel had anointed him, so he's looking at a failure when he looks at Saul. And it got to him, you know. But we read here in chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, and in the first verse, I have, says God, provided for myself a king, a king. So he says to him, I'll send you to Jesse down in Bethlehem. And so Samuel's uneasy. He says, if I go, Saul will kill me. And the Lord said, go. I'll show you what you're supposed to do. So he goes down there. And under the cover of making a sacrifice down by Bethlehem, and the elders come out and greet him because he's a prophet and an ex-judge and so on. And so he's looking over the sons of Jesse. And one after the other, they pass before him. And they're some pretty nice fellows. But God keeps saying to Samuel, nope, not this one. Nope, not that one either. No, not this one. And then comes that famous text at the end of verse, where are we? Verse 7 here. The Lord sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance. We're still doing it today. But the Lord looks on the heart. Oh, and 7 sons passed before Samuel. And it was no, right down the line. And Samuel is perturbed now. He says, you know, here. And it's a negative on every one. And so he's sort of flummoxed. And he says to Jesse, are these all your sons? Don't you have another one? Well, yes, he says, the youngest. And he's out with the sheep. So, verse 12, he sent and brought him in, the youngest. And he was ruddy. He was a redhead. Oh, my. Beautiful eyes, handsome. And the Lord says immediately, arise, anoint him. Oh, verse 14, the Spirit of the Lord departs from Saul. And here now is David, who is the new king of Israel. A shepherd, a tender of sheep, says verse 16, he's a musician also. He played the lyre. That was a stringed instrument, not a guitar, no. And Saul was in a terrible mood. And music sometimes helps us when we're depressed. And David played, and it helped. Now, since we are to David, who is the second king, he's anointed, chapter 16, we need to slow down and take a look here. David, there's more about David in the Bible than anyone else except the Lord Jesus. So obviously, he is big stuff. David is important. Of the three kings in the United Kingdom, he is certainly the prize of the three. And you begin to see what he's made of in chapter 17. Chapter 17, the Philistines again. They were a pain in the heart. And they had among them the sons of Anak, and these were giants. And so they're a little bit southwest of Bethlehem, the valley of Elah. On one side of the mountain are the Philistines, on the other mountain and the valley between them are the Jews. The valley of Elah. And now it is that Goliath comes down every day and challenges the Jews. Send somebody out, I'll fight with him. If you lose, you're our servants. If we lose, we'll be your servants. David's not in the army. He's too young, but his father sends him out with a care package for his brothers who have all been conscripted by Saul to fight the Philistines. So this is one of the famous chapters in the Bible, 1 Samuel 17, David and Goliath. And you've got it. David wins. Goliath is insulted that this kid comes out to fight with him. No armor. He tried on Saul's, didn't work. Wasn't used to it. All he has is his sling, which is a leather affair in which you put a stone. He'd used it, and he had done some fighting even though he wasn't in the army. When the lion, the bear came after the sheep in the night, he took these beasts on single-handed and took them out. And that stone, he was good with that. He took 5, it says from the brook. And somebody says, what were the other 4? Just in case Goliath had some brothers, that's all. He was ready for them. But remember that Goliath from head to foot is clothed in armor. So what good is a stone? It would just bounce off the bronze, that's all. Well, he had to see, and so there's a little opening on the forehead and the eyes, and that's where that stone hits. The stone stuns him, drops him. David is on him, pulls his sword, and takes his head off and brings it back to King Saul. Chapter 17. Nothing like it you'll find any place. Here is heroism par excellence. And from this time on, David, chapter 18, David, of course, is a national hero now, having delivered the whole army and taken the people out, and goes back, and the women are singing, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Chapter 18, verse 7. And Saul is angry, of course. He can't stand not being the big shot, but he is. It's David now who's on. And he has promised his daughter to the one who kills Goliath, and David gets her, and so on. Now, we start through the balance of the book of 1 Samuel. It's a cat and mouse kind of thing. Saul now, insulted, humiliated, intimidated, can't handle it. He was a proud man. Didn't have much to be proud of, but he was a proud man. And his pride has been wounded, terribly wounded by David. Saul simply could not swallow or digest David's stunning victory over Goliath and the Philistines, and the response of the nation, especially the women who are singing the praises of David. And from here on, the rest, chapter 19 through 31 in 1 Samuel, Saul has one objective: kill David. Take him out. Get him out of the way. He can't stand the sight of him. And he's in his own house, and David is his son-in-law. But David's life is not safe from here on. But he has a friend in Jonathan. And that helps him, because Jonathan is David's embedded spy in the royal household, and Jonathan passes along intelligence that's very helpful. Well, they sit at the same table, of course, because David now is in the palace with Saul. 2 times, Saul pulls his dagger from his belt and sends it whizzing at David. David ducks, it sticks in the wall. David escapes. In chapter 19, verse 18, David fled and escaped, and he's out of sight for a while. And this whole period from chapter 18 to the end of the book is pretty well summed up. You should underline this in chapter 20 and end of verse 3, where David says, "There is but a step between me and death." That's it. And end of verse 31, Saul orders David to be brought in and says, "He shall surely die." And but no, he doesn't get him. But David is down now. He's with priest, chapter 21 at Nob. out of the reach of Saul. And Saul is hunting David like you would hunt an animal. And they're down by Ein Gedi, which is right down by the Dead Sea, chapter 24, in the wilderness of En Gedi. And Saul has 3,000 men. So it's David who's pretty much by himself. And Saul is after him. So David is in a cave, and Saul comes in this cave to relieve himself. David had Saul in his hands. Could have easily killed him. David arose, it says, end of verse 4, and cut off a corner of Saul's robe just to prove that he had him. But he did not harm him. And he spares him. And so it goes. Finally, old age, of course. Chapter 25, verse 1, Samuel died. He passes off the scene. And David went down to the wilderness, it says, verse 1 of Paran, the man there who was rich and so on. And the story of Nabal comes into the record. You read that, we can't pause over every one of these things. But chapter 26, David is sparing King Saul again. It would have been in self-defense if he had killed Saul. And you are never convicted of murder when you kill someone in self-defense. So David would have been all right in the eyes of the Lord and the people as well. But he had a good heart and loved the Lord. Now, David is, as I said, a great man. And tucked into this period of the kingdom, you have a lot of Bible books. We have the poetical books, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Now, Job comes back to the time of Abraham, 2000 BC. But the rest of those poetical books come into the time of the United Kingdom. And the book of Psalms, of course, we'll always talk about the Psalms of David. The book of Psalms we associate with David. The book of Psalms is the songbook, the hymnal of the Bible. The book of Psalms, some denominational groups have a prayer book. Maybe you've had a prayer book. The book of Psalms is the prayer book. You want a prayer book? Here it is. The Psalms are the prayer book of the Bible. And just a couple of items here. Sometimes you hear someone say in a Bible class or service, let's turn to Psalms 23. Well, it's Psalm, singular. It's the book of Psalms, plural. But when you're referring to a single one, it's singular. And then also, when you come to the book of Psalms, you find that they are from the pen of David, the songster, the psalmist of Israel, David. Now, So we'll pick up, we're not finished with David, obviously, but we're finished with the clock here. So we'll cut it off and pick up with David next time.